So here's the deal. Something seriously messy just went down between Kamala Harris and Meghan Markle, and no one saw it coming. We're talking about screaming, finger-pointing, full-on storm energy. And it all happened smack in the middle of a Netflix shoot. And guess what? This wasn't just any show. This was with Love Meghan Season 2. The supposed comeback ride for Meghan's shaky Hollywood career. But instead of a glamorous reset, it's spiraling into one chaotic disaster after another. And Kamala Harris wants nothing to do with it anymore. Here's what went down. Netflix had this idea. Meghan Markle wanted to go big for Season 2. Bigger guests, more drama, and this time a touch of politics. So they reached out to some big names, including Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, to make cameo appearances. The pitch: keep it casual, relevant, and somehow tie it into the show's cooking and conversation vibe. But the execution, total train wreck. The plan was for Kamala to appear in Episode 4 for a 10-minute segment, where she would supposedly announce her run for California governor. Yep, that was going to be the place for the big political drop. But from the moment she stepped on set, things just kept going sideways. According to people behind the scenes, Meghan couldn't stick to the script. She kept fumbling her lines, forgetting key moments, and randomly going off topic. And not just a little. At one point, she reportedly brought up Donald Trump repeatedly and started talking about how it felt to lose to him, which made zero sense in context. Kamala was not amused. Harris, who's used to structured political appearances, had already made it clear no improvisation, no unnecessary drama, and definitely no Trump talk. She didn't want to be used as bait for controversy. But Meghan saw an opportunity. She believed that dragging Trump into the conversation would make the scene pop, stir up tension, get people talking, boost the episode's views, even if it meant ruffling a few political feathers. By the fourth or fifth take, Kamala had enough. Meghan kept derailing the shoot, demanding retakes and throwing in unscripted jabs that made the entire set uncomfortable. At one point, Harris reportedly raised her voice, not just at Meghan, but at the entire production team. She called the process a waste of time, said Meghan was unprofessional and disorganized, and then came the walkout. Witnesses say Kamala pointed a finger right at Meghan, telling her she didn't deserve to host such an important political moment on her show. Then she stormed off the set, leaving everyone frozen. Her team and security followed without a word. The shoot was done. Netflix producers were left scrambling. That whole 10-minute cameo they'd planned for Episode 4, gone, wiped out. What was supposed to be a huge moment for the show, maybe even a turning point for Meghan's public image, just imploded. And here's the kicker. Kamala doesn't even want the footage used. She wants it deleted, trashed, burned. She's already distancing herself from the show and reportedly told Netflix she won't be involved in anything Meghan Markle is part of moving forward. No specials, no interviews, nothing. The fallout from that one shoot has rippled across the entire production. Now, the Netflix execs, especially Greg Peters and Ted Sarandos, are stuck in a mess they didn't see coming. What started as a cute celebrity cooking concept has now turned into a minefield of politics, ego, and off-script chaos. And they're realizing Meghan might be more trouble than she's worth. Behind closed doors, Netflix execs were fuming. Kamala's meltdown wasn't just a PR nightmare. It put the entire credibility of the show on thin ice. Greg Peters was reportedly pacing around the lot that afternoon, muttering about how they should have pulled the plug earlier. Ted Sarandos wasn't any calmer. He'd already been fielding angry calls for weeks over Meghan's chaotic shoot schedules, ballooning budgets, and now a political disaster that could end up costing Netflix way more than it was ever going to gain. What made it worse was that this wasn't an isolated case. Kamala wasn't the first guest Meghan had clashed with. Gavin Newsom had already gone through a similar episode weeks prior. His cameo was supposed to be lighthearted, tied to some cooking competition segment where he'd try Meghan's avocado toast and casually joke about leadership and wellness. But Meghan flipped the script literally. She tried steering the conversation into controversial territory, poking at California policies and hinting at Gavin's rumored presidential ambitions. It got uncomfortable fast. Newsom didn't yell, but he left early and told his team to keep communication with Netflix strictly professional. Meghan took that as a win, assuming she'd stirred enough drama to make the episode trend. But for the platform's higher-ups, this wasn't content. It was damage control. The entire set had turned into a war zone of passive-aggressive glances and whispered complaints. Crew members started timing how long Meghan spent in makeup versus how long she stayed focused on set. Her team, made up of brand strategists, assistants, and self-proclaimed vision managers, were constantly clashing with Netflix's actual production leads. Scripts were revised at the last minute. Scenes were scrapped because Meghan didn't like the way she looked under certain lighting. There were even rumors that she was secretly having someone filter her on-camera footage during post-production. But nothing topped the chaos of Episode 4. That episode wasn't just missing Kamala's segment. It also lacked a proper structure because Meghan insisted on reworking the entire narrative arc to position herself as the emotional center of the season. The show was no longer about food or family or anything coherent. It had turned into a vehicle for unscripted monologues, political jabs, and vague empowerment speeches that often went nowhere. Internally, Netflix staff started calling the show with Love Meghan, but mostly about Meghan. What was once supposed to be a lifestyle series with a mix of guests and topics had become a shrine to one person's image. And that person couldn't even stick to a script long enough to finish a 10-minute segment without spiraling into rant mode. Word began spreading quickly. Publicists started pulling their clients from the guest list. A few were still contractually locked and requested shorter appearances or demanded tighter control over what would be aired. One even asked for full editorial veto power over their scenes. The message was clear. No one wanted to be part of the Meghan Markle circus unless it was carefully edited and guaranteed to stay drama-free. Meanwhile, Meghan remained unfazed. She reportedly told her inner circle that controversy drives viewership and that people would tune in just to see what she'd say next. In her mind, this was marketing gold. She believed the backlash was proof that she was being bold, not problematic. But as Netflix quietly ran internal tests on the early cuts of the season, the numbers told a different story. Focus groups were confused. Some were outright annoyed. Viewers didn't know if they were watching a cooking show, a political rout, or a chaotic self-help documentary. And with Kamala Harris now completely out and Gavin Newsom stepping back, the question became painfully obvious. Who was this show even for anymore? Netflix's top brass gathered for an emergency meeting just 2 days after the Harris fiasco. The vibe in the room was tense. Some execs argued to scrap the entire season. Others insisted on salvaging what they could, cutting the political content, minimizing Meghan's rants, and rebranding the series into something halfway watchable. The problem: too much of the footage was already centered around Meghan. There wasn't enough balance to rework it into a guest-driven format anymore. And worst of all, they were already way over budget. The original production plan was modest: a small crew, a handful of celebrity guests, and some heartfelt episodes around food, identity, and growth. But once Meghan took control, everything shifted. She demanded new sets, extended reshoots, multiple guest revisions, and even pushed for high-profile cameos that Netflix hadn't greenlit yet. The entire production ballooned into a vanity project that was bleeding money without delivering anything coherent. In the midst of all this, Meghan remained convinced she was creating something groundbreaking. She told one of the showrunners that her goal wasn't just to entertain. It was to reshape how women of power are portrayed on screen. But what she failed to grasp was that the show wasn't being received as bold or revolutionary. It was being seen as chaotic, self-indulgent, and confused about its own purpose. Behind the scenes, one of the editors quit midway through post-production. He reportedly told the team he couldn't make sense of the storyline, even with a full whiteboard and 2 weeks of notes. The timeline was scattered. Voiceovers contradicted previous scenes, and Meghan often referred to events that weren't even part of the original cut. Trying to stitch it all together was like editing a fever dream. It wasn't just internal frustrations. Word got out. Tabloids picked up on the Kamala walkout, and suddenly headlines were everywhere. Storms off Netflix set, and with Love Meghan turns political nightmare started trending. Meghan tried to do damage control through her PR team, but it only made things worse. The statements contradicted earlier reports, and the public wasn't buying it. People started clowning the show before it even dropped. And then came the investor calls. Netflix shareholders weren't happy. They had already weathered criticism for their multi-million-dollar deal with Harry and Meghan, and now this show looked like it was about to tank even harder than Heart of Invictus. Execs were grilled about viewership projections, contract obligations, and contingency plans. Someone even asked if there was a clause in the agreement that allowed them to cancel the release entirely. That's how bad it was getting. As a last resort, Netflix brought in a crisis team to decide how to launch the series without further damaging the platform's reputation. They considered quietly dumping it with no promotion, just releasing on a random weekday and letting it sink. Another option was re-editing the season into a shorter, heavily filtered version, cutting all political talk and focusing only on the most neutral part. But even that felt like a gamble. Meghan, on the other hand, wasn't slowing down. She was already pitching ideas for Season 3. In 2003, she wanted to go global, cook with politicians in different countries, bring in royalty from Europe, maybe even film a special in Africa, but no one was listening anymore. Internally, Netflix had already started flagging the show as a high-risk asset. Some insiders joked it would make more sense to sell the rights to a parody network and let them do whatever they wanted with it. Whatever happens next, one thing is clear. Meghan's attempt to mix politics, celebrity, and personal glory into one explosive show didn't just backfire. It scorched everything in its path. And Kamala Harris, she's already moved on like it never.